But it really helped us as an organization start to think differently about, okay, how do we think about innovation? And it was one of the biggest catalysts for us having changed the way we think inside the company. When we reset our values a couple of years ago, being bold became one of our values, which was not one of our values before as a 117-year-old mutual company. So innovation, trying new things, taking risks became part of our culture. Hi, I'm Steve Shaffer, CEO of Homesteaders Life company.
Hey everyone, Brent Williams, founder and CEO of Benekiva.
And this is the future of insurance.
Steve and Brent, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Not just today, I have taken an inordinate amount of your and your company's time. Hopefully no shareholders are concerned about that, but to share your story of working together, and we're just going to do more of that today. So thank you both for joining me. I don't want to have you each trying to talk over each other, so I'll be more directed. But Steve, you said your name first during the intro. Would you just kick us off? Tell us who you are and who Homesteaders is.
Yeah. So again, Steve Shaffer. I've been at Homesteaders now just about 10 years and 5 years as CEO. Came on board to step into this position. Came from, not from the insurance profession, but rather from the funeral profession, and our business is very closely tied to the funeral profession. I worked with private equity for many, many years in that space, and then came over to a 117-year-old mutual company. And it's been a great journey for us, and the company's doing great, and just couldn't be happier to be where I am and what I'm doing right now.
That's awesome. And Brent, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Brent Williams. I'm the founder and CEO of Benekiva. And prior to Benekiva, I was an investment financial advisor and built a substantial advisory practice. And that's really where the idea of Benekiva came from.
So tell us about that. So what is Benekiva? And then that'll, I think, lead into why the two of you are here together.
Yeah. So Benekiva is a digitized claims servicing and new business platform for insurance carriers. And really the idea stemmed from working with policyholders, carriers, and beneficiaries throughout the claims and servicing processes. And as an advisor, on one hand, I was constantly apologizing for the archaic processes, while on the other hand, I was trying to serve, maintain, and gain clients. And so it really just put me in kind of a weird spot, and decided to see if there was a solution out there. And originally I was going to be a client. I was just going to buy the solution and offer it to my clients. And since there wasn't a solution out there, I said, well, there needs to be a solution.
That's not a normal response for insurance people. That's all. Usually we just give up at that point, but you fought on. But I think it is interesting that you fast forward a bit. You had the idea, you put together you and two co-founders, and you start talking to folks about it. And Steve, that's sort of when you came on the scene, as your predecessor had some opening conversations, but you've got a startup that has no customers. I always say, like, they're not even really a startup because the founders had other jobs still. They still had their day jobs. And not only did you decide, like, yeah, we're going to be their first customer, but you also decided to invest in them. Having sold into carriers and lived on that side, that's a really tall order, even if they had a bunch of customers and were a going concern. What was it that allowed you to say, you know what, we need to take a bet on this, and it's a bigger bet than just would we use them as a solution?
Yeah, so Brett and I quickly developed a deep friendship and an understanding of what they were trying to achieve. And Homesteaders pays a lot of claims. We pay over 60,000 claims a year. So what we saw was an opportunity to partner with Brent and his team, something that they had built, and bring it as a solution to our company, and help us kind of leg up our internal processes and move towards digital workflows farther ahead of schedule than we would have ever been able to if we had tried to do this internally. So that was the first thing. Second thing was we did a little bit of research and saw that there was really no solution in the marketplace when we were thinking about how we were going to solve for this. And so it became a, kind of a clear path for us, which isn't obvious when you look at it, as you said, all the factors you were considering. Plus, I was a brand new CEO. I literally had just stepped into this seat, and in a 117-year-old mutual company that really hadn't done much in innovation and hadn't invested in startups for sure in any significant way, but felt like this was something that's core to our business, core to our customer experience, and was important for us to think about going forward. And we built the partnership together in a way that it made sense for us and made sense for Brent and his team.
Steve, there are a lot of things I want to ask you about, and I'm recognizing this isn't going to be the same length as the whole case, so I need to get off that and stop worrying about all the details. But I do love the story, and there were a few particular moments where the notion of culture and culture change were really profound. And Brent, actually, there are a number of things culturally in how you set up Benekiva and how you live as a company that I think are completely aligned with that. I was literally just got off a call with someone telling them about how you have your prospects in your customer meeting where people are talking about, we wish you did this better or differently. And I'm sure the prospects are like, I walked in the wrong room. I'm not supposed to be hearing this stuff right now. They don't want me to, see the dirty laundry. But it's like this openness, this culture change was a consistent theme throughout. Brent, if I could start with you, there were some cultural things and how you set up the company, the lanes of responsibility, this openness, the genuinely two-way feedback. Those are all nice things I think a lot of companies claim, especially in their recruiting stuff. We're open, we're non-hierarchical, but very few live. Why did you set them up that way? And how do you actually live that?
Yeah, it all stemmed from the research. When I was doing the research for Benekiva, a few things I heard all the time was, carriers were tired of vendors coming in and promising that the platform or the solution does this. Then when they sign big contracts, they figure out, oh, it does this, but the rest of this needs to be built or solutioned out. And we said, we don't want to be that. We want to be 100% transparent with our client partners. And we call them client partners for a reason. I've said since day one, the moment Benekiva becomes a vendor, we have lost.
Yeah.
Not a vendor for our carrier clients. We are a partner. So that includes knowing and understanding that the road is not always going to be without bumps. There are going to be bumps in the road. I don't care how good the technology is. I don't care how good the teams are working together. There are going to be bumps in the road, but it's about owning that and understanding and being fully transparent. I tell our team, if we've done something wrong, we own it. We own it and we go explain, here's where we messed up. Here are the things we put in place to rectify that. Here are the policies and procedures we put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. And now we're moving forward. I think if a true partner works that way.
Yeah. Steve, obviously you being on the receiving end of that, you talked to me about looking at this opportunity, not just to get a system, not just have an investment that hopefully does well financially, but the investment you really seem to be talking about was helping the company transition its thinking, approach innovation differently. I mean, it was all cultural kind of stuff. Was the way that Benekiva was engaging, was that one of the key drivers of it? And what did you have to do to make sure that you actually got that sort of cultural shift to take place?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it was really hard in the beginning because our company was used to dealing with vendors, not partners, and particularly not startup partners, who were just really, building out their product solution. So it was important to us because as a smaller mutual company in a niche space, we weren't going to set aside $100 million for a venture fund to do innovation, right?
Yeah.
We realized as a management team that we had to roll up our sleeves and get into innovation if we were going to do it, but do it in very focused ways that were going to benefit our business. And we saw Benekiva as being a great opportunity for us to do that. Just roll up our sleeves, get in there with Brent and his team and figure it out and change the culture internally by doing that. But changing culture is really hard, right? So 117-year-old mutual company that had pretty much done things the same way for a very, very, very long time. And trying to get them to think differently. It took a lot of discipline in the beginning to not let our internal team mandate to Brent and his team that we were just going to do the same things we always did, but in a different platform. Yeah. Because we believed in Brent's vision of taking something to the market to solve, a bigger problem. So that we knew that we had to think about things differently. And we knew that they could bring more openness towards changing our processes, improving our processes, and eliminating steps that weren't necessarily necessary by changing the way we process things. but it did, it was probably the biggest area of friction when we first started was our team wanting to do everything they'd always done, just in a different platform, and making sure that the platform built it to do it exactly the way we've always done it. And Brent and his team did a great job of helping us navigate that and drive change. But I will say it wasn't easy, but it really helped us as an organization start to think differently about, okay, how do we think about innovation? And it was one of the biggest catalysts for us having changed the way we think inside the company. And it's gone on to provide a lot of benefits for us in other areas where we've now started innovating other aspects of our business, new product lines, new ways of processing things, new ways of partnering with other organizations. It's been great.
Yeah, sort of, it's a way to learn on the job.
Right. We knew that it wasn't going to, go hire an innovation team. That wasn't going to work for us. We just aren't of the size and scale. And plus, those things always have a hard time changing your culture, because it's always them. They're doing that thing, right? They're doing that innovation thing. And when is it going to actually provide results? For us, they were us. We were the team working on innovation with Brent and his team. And I think it really helped our team a lot, and the culture of the whole company, because it was everybody inside the company working towards that same goal.
Yeah. Well, I think, you had also said, you mentioned like, we're not going to set up $100 million venture fund. You could have been an LP in any one of the many funds that are, purely insurance focused or funded by insurers. But your reason for not doing that was very similar. Is that's fine. Maybe investment wise, we'd have more protection and diversification, but we get none of the firsthand benefit from making the direct investment. And then where's the culture lift?
Right.
Probably is the biggest ROI of any of it.
Yeah, that's the way we looked at it. And it's actually proven to be true for us in a pretty significant way. We're doing a lot of things that we never would have done if we hadn't started down the path towards actually jumping in and really getting involved in innovation.
Yeah. Well, I know early on, I think for any carrier person listening, this will resonate, is the notion that we've had the way we've worked. When it comes time to do a new system, we give the requirements, which are the way that we work. So ultimately, we're just asking for each new system to rebuild this. We've probably been working the same way for 80 years now. And just every time it's just less familiar because it's a new system we have to learn. But Brent, you were even getting wireframes from the business users at Homesteaders. I mean, they weren't just like, we wanted to like ask this person to, like, they designed it for you. How do you navigate, like, okay, first customer, they're also invested in us. How do we politely not take them asking us to build something that's the wrong answer? Like, how do you engage with that without turning everyone off?
Yeah, it was interesting in the beginning, because Steve and I always understood, and we agreed that there's two parts to this. There's the investment side, and then there's the client side. And we kind of wanted to draw a Chinese wall between the two. What's good on the investment side might not be what's good on the client side, and vice versa. But when we had that specific scenario, it's tough for the team, because the team wants to please Homesteaders, because not only are they a client, but they're also our investors. So there was this unintended notion that, we have to do it their way. And that's when, Steve and I said, no, we would get together and have our huddles and say, no, we can't do it that way, because that's doing it the same way we always did. So I have to, empower our team to go back to the client side and say, no, this isn't how we're doing things. The wireframe thing was interesting. As I said, I coached the team. You got to go back to them. You got to say, what are you trying to accomplish, right? Yeah. And what is the expected outcome? The in between, we don't need that. We'll bring you back options, right? So just tell us, what do you want to do? What outcome do you want? We'll handle the rest. And it was tough to coach even our team to have the empowerment to go back and not necessarily tell them no, but tell them, no, this isn't how we're going to do it.
Well, and Steve, I can imagine it must have placed you in an awkward position, because I mean, if I was one of those business users, I'd be like, yeah, but we put all this money into them. Don't, like, I know you could say, like, don't we own them, or don't they have to do it? Or like, can we just pull our money back? And then they, like, maybe trying to put you in a position to be, I don't know,
the hammer.
Yeah, the hammer. Like, I was just saying, overbearing. But I found it interesting in the way you structured the steering committees on the investment side and the customer side. You weren't on the customer side, right? You were just engaged through the investment, which I said that to a group, and immediately people's eyebrows went up as if it was wrong. It was
Yeah,
like, well, the CEO's not bought in, then it doesn't matter. But you're missing the point.
yeah.
They didn't ask
Very
you to be
bottom.
like the strong arm of the law, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really important for me not to let that inclination, even my inclination to say, hey, we want to get our system up and running quickly. And for our team, that meant do exactly what we used to do. But having that discipline, and I will say Brent, Bobby, and their team really helped us stay focused on that, but being willing to listen to what they're saying and say, look, we've got this friction point. Here's what we're hearing. Let's make sure we consider this from a, hey, the platform standpoint and how it's going to be relevant in the market versus just what's going to fix our immediate problem today. And that was probably a friction point in the first, I don't know, 12 months of meetings all the time, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody's like, just make them do this, right? And the way we structured it, it worked out really well. The operations team, they took care of working with Brent and his team as a vendor. On the investment side, we had that separated with a different group of people. There was a little bit of crossover, just enough so that we had good data, the consistency of information.
Yeah.
But in the end, it was good to have that because we could basically evaluate the request and the friction points as investors differently than we would have if we were just listening to what our claims team wanted to have happen and our IT team wanted to have happen internally. And it allowed for a little bit of separation and worked quite well. And it wasn't that I was any less bought into it because, look, I was a new CEO who just said, we're going to invest in this startup that doesn't have any customers, right? So I was really bought in from the day we started, but it bought in a way to committed to the big goal, which is to build something that's going to be good for the insurance profession, not just for homesteaders.
Yeah. You did want to keep your job. That was,
I did want to
how
keep
can I
my
get
job.
fired as quickly as possible?
Luckily our board was very supportive of it as well. And so, but there were moments where they scratched their head because they weren't really familiar, none of them were involved in startups either. So it was an education process for them. And luckily Brent and his team have had such great success that it's made it easy for me to have those conversations with the board.
Well, look, you say great success, and it has been. But one thing I really appreciated was you were also both, and we had the whole leadership team from Benekiva. And so the four of you were also extremely honest about everything, which I always feel like when you get the really sanitized version of the story, you're not really going to learn anything because you can't trust what you're hearing. There were some tougher moments. And as you said, like even the best projects will still run into that. One of the things that stood out to me was where there was a consultant sitting between the companies and, not malicious intent or incompetence or anything like that, but just inherently you had a party between the companies as a sort of translation layer, who probably subconsciously their interests were misaligned with both of yours, that the longer the project goes, the more money they make. For you, the shorter the project goes, the faster it gets to completion, the better. So that started to create some friction in it. How do you spot that and navigate? Because we all face those kinds of issues. The system integrators are fantastic and inherently misaligned from what the two companies might want. So how do you navigate that? And I know this one had a particular way to navigate it that maybe isn't the answer anyway, everywhere, but how did you spot that and navigate that? And Brent, I think it started with you starting to notice a problem with getting to delivery, right?
Yeah, one of the big things we started noticing was, everybody talks about the 80-20 rule, right? Get 80% stuff up and running and then focus on the other 20% as you go. And we actually started seeing more. It was more like 99.1%. We were focusing more on the 1%. And really the only way you can truly tackle that is with real insights and data. So what I did was I started having the team track, when they ask for a request of whatever that process is, we would ask, the first question we would ask is this just for homesteaders or is this going to help the entire community on Benekiva? That's the first thing. Then the second thing is, regardless of whether it helps homesteaders or the entire platform, at the end of the day, that 20%, we do want the Benekiva platform to handle all those. The question is, does it need to handle it today versus tomorrow?
Right.
So when we would go back to homesteaders with a particular item, we would say, okay, you want this feature. Now tell us how many times you've had that problem in the last 24 months. They'd go do the data and they'd come back and say, oh, well, we did it 3 times. Okay, then is that something we really should be focusing on right now? Or is that something we can focus on in the future? At the end of the day, we want to solve every single one of those problems. But the question is, do we want to solve it right now?
Right.
And for the consulting company in the middle, they want 100% perfection today, because then the project goes longer and longer. So once we took those insights and data back to the team, then it was mutually decided that maybe that wasn't in the best interest for everybody involved.
Yeah. When Steve, that hearing your side of that story, that wasn't a moment where you put your foot down and just told them what, you didn't say you have to get that done, or no business side, my people, you need to just let that go. It was another one of these moments where you had to make a decision of culturally, what's the answer that might take longer in this moment, but is better for us in the long run in terms of how these companies work together.
Yeah, I think Brian, it goes back to, in the beginning, Brent and I had sat down and we had a foundation of understanding of what we were trying to achieve together as investors and as partners in the organization. And so looking at that long range goal, and then Brent and his team did a great job of bringing to the forefront some of the issues of having the vendor in between us, which, as we look back at it, we needed the resources from outside to help get it done, but then it did create a dysfunctional aspect of it, because they were treating Benekiva as a vendor. We wanted them treated as a partner, and they were trying to just make the vendor do whatever that our team said they wanted to do. So it was really nothing that was a fault of the vendor, but just the way it worked, that basically it became this friction point that we weren't making any progress and everybody was getting frustrated.
Yeah.
And then we looked at it and we're like, yeah, this is structurally a problem for us. So we had accomplished most of what we needed from a outside resource standpoint at that point, and decided we could, eliminate them from the process. And it made all the difference in the world. And Brent and his team did a great job of shifting some of the structural interactions with our team at the same time, which basically facilitated, our ability to remove the vendor at that point and work together directly with Benekiva. And it wasn't immediately, but I would say pretty shortly after that, 30 days after, everything was working smoothly, and it was like a breath of fresh air, and everybody goes, this is how it should be working, right?
Yeah.
So, but it did. One of the things I will say, Brian, that really helped in that regard was because we had that split approach of operations team and vendor, and consultant vendor working with Benekiva, and the investment side, because we could have these conversations at the investment level. And everybody would understand, and there wasn't a lot of emotion or frustration at the investor level. When it came to the operational teams, that always got in the way of getting to some of those root causes. But when we could take it to that next level and kind of separate it from the implementation to the investment, that allowed us to have those conversations, make those decisions, and move forward. And it worked really, really well. But I will say Brent and his team did a great job of documenting it factually, so we could have a real, frank, rational discussion about it, and really evaluate, okay, what are the root causes of some of these frustrations, and get to a good answer pretty quickly.
Yeah. In the interest of time, I don't want to wrap things up, but I'm going to anyway. Going back to the culture point, is like, Homesteaders got a great system. It's been really helpful. There's been benefits, and we talked about that in the interview, and it talked about that in the case. But Steve, you talked about the bigger benefits to the company, and as you get further along, you're seeing how it helps start a shift. Brent, you guys were just starting out, so it was really foundational to you, but also starting out on the right foot laid the groundwork for continuing on the right foot. I wonder if each of you has some thoughts about what is collaborating effectively and going in with that kind of humbleness, humility, openness, collaborative approach set you up for possibility wise for your organization, the carrier side and the insurtech side? Steve, if you don't mind starting.
Yeah, I'll go first. So for us, it was a couple different aspects. One, when we reset our values a couple of years ago, after I'd been in this seat for a little while, being bold became one of our values, which was not one of our values before as a 117-year-old mutual company. So innovation, trying new things, taking risk became part of our culture. And do we still have some, work to do in that area? Sure. But by and large, the company has really kind of pivoted and is very welcoming of risk and the right kind of risk, but for the right reasons. And that's been a really good outcome of this process and some other things we've done. The other thing was from a standpoint of being willing to make investments and partner and listen to other people. It's been a good exercise for us to open our minds to other ways of doing things, and that we don't have all the answers. And that if we just take the approach of being willing to listen and truly partner with somebody, we'll get a better outcome than if we, keep that vendor investor kind of, we have all the money, or we're the buyer or the purchaser of your service, and we don't have to listen to you. You have to listen to us. Customer's always right kind of attitude, or investor is always right. That has demonstrated to us how we can partner with other folks as a mutual incumbent insurer and do a lot of new creative things, and have a win-win situation come out on the other side. It's been really good for our organization and our culture.
I love that. Brent, how about for yourself? Like, yes, you get to quit your day job and do this full time and build something that you guys are over 100 people now, right?
Not over, but we're getting there.
Right around there. All right. But it's worked out. It's worked out well. So what did the way that this first engagement went, how did that set things up culturally for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because back to the research, one of the things we heard was vendors, it's one thing to build a great piece of technology. It's another thing to install a great piece of technology. They're two completely different things. And we had proven we built a nice piece of technology, but we hadn't proven we could install it. And so, part of this is learning how do we work with an incumbent 117-year-old mutual to install our platform when looking at their past, a lot of their applications were on-prem, a lot of the applications weren't a cloud-based solution like ours. So when we talk about security, we have to talk about, okay, well, this is actually more secure than the way you're currently doing it today. And here's the data and research to back that up, But I think the really neat part about it was we had access to all of Homesteaders' employees. So we could actually go and have conversations with project managers who weren't even on the project and say, okay, imagine you're a Benekiva, how would you do this process? And they actually gave us a lot of inputs on our process to where now we can refine our process going forward, working with future insurance companies. Because, our team, of course, Bobby and Sovan, they'd installed platforms in the past, but they hadn't installed a platform like a Benekiva in the insurance industry at a 100-plus-year-old company. So while you've installed platforms in the past, there's some things you're going to learn and have to adjust your process simply because of the type of clients that we're working with.
Yeah, it gave you broader insights than you would have had if it had just stayed in that lane. It's like, no, we hired you to do this thing.
Exactly.
So stop talking to these people over here. There is so much more in this story. I don't have favorites, but if I did, it would be hard not to pick yours. But I love all of the stories in the book. They're all fantastic.
Yeah.
It was just a fantastic and honest recounting of the two companies working together. And, I often hear a lot of pushback from people. It's like, oh, but we're like this, but, we need to be careful of that. And one of the things that I love is like, but that company's too new for us. And I think I share with you the story I got where we lost out to a competitor because the CEO had a decision that no company younger than 12 years old could be worked with as a vendor. And they didn't choose either of us actually, because we were both too new, but today that company would be 12 years old. My old company would not be. It was still single digits. That company's out of the market.
Yeah.
So you chose off age, like that doesn't matter. But Steve, you chose a company that I was like, to be fair, it wasn't even really a company yet. Like they weren't even, they had stuff, but they were still employed elsewhere. So I love holding that up as when people give me their excuses of all the rules. And it's like, well, okay, but how do you know? And here's someone who did it and they weren't even employed there yet. So anything is possible. And you guys were a great story of that. And not just possible, it went really well. I got to hear about 2 companies that grew in fantastic ways, one from scratch, one from a long legacy of success and stability, willing to try to be bold in a new way. And that takes giving a chance to things. I can't thank you both enough for the time that you gave to this. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Thanks. Really appreciate it. Thanks for letting us tell the story. It's a great one. But,
Yeah.
We really love how it's turned out. And, to say, the simplest thing to say is Brent and I are still great friends,
That's a good sign, right?
It's been good all the way along. And
Yeah.
with that foundation, that's made all the difference, right? To know from the beginning, we both have the same objective, which is to make this successful.
I've even said, and I've told Steve this because to his point, we are great friends, and I've told him that he's one of the very few leaders that I would actually go work for. He's just that type of individual, and I have a strong feeling that we'll be working together well beyond Benekiva, beyond Homesteaders. We'll definitely have a long-term connection. So that's pretty cool.
All right. So I guess that means I get to interview you guys again 20 years from now. We'll do
Yeah. Thanks,
follow-up
Bryan.
episode. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you to Steve and Brent for taking even more of their time to sit down and do this interview. I love this story. I love the nuances to it between being a customer, being an investor, and all the potential ways that those 2 things can step on each other's toes or, cross wires and create problems. The ways that they navigated that, the decisions they made from a cultural standpoint, it's so clear the impact it had. And it wasn't all roses, it wasn't all perfect, but they always learned. And I think that's fascinating. There's so much I think everybody could take from this, especially this point I'm always making about humility. This story has it in spades. If you're interested in it, please do pick up the book, if for no other reason than just to read this one story. But I promise you, there's 4 others you're going to enjoy and learn from as well. Just go to future-of-insurance.com/3, number 3. It'll take you to a page with all the ways you can get the book: Amazon, Kindle, Amazon print and hardcover, I should say, Kindle, Audible, even signed copies from me. If that's the kind of thing that you want, you can get all that right there. So thank you. Thank you to Steve and Brent and the teams at Benekiva and Homesteaders Life for giving up their CEOs for a little bit more to chat with me and all of you today. And I hope to see you here next time. Thanks, everyone.